It is so cool to be here, and I am standing before you, gloriously imperfect and deliriously happy. And you know, I haven't always been that way. And when I had the opportunity to come here and speak, it's like, oh, there are so many different things I can speak about. I've got so much to share. So I've had to just pick out little bits as much as I can. I really hope that this will be of use to you, enrich you, and nourish you. And as you listen to this, if there are ways that you think I may be able to help you talk through your forgiveness stuff, you have on your chairs pamphlets from me with little fill-in form. You just tear off the side, fill in your name and your contact details, and I will spend time with you and talk about you. And if you're interested in having courses, the other side, you tick off what you're interested in. I'll be talking about what the work I do and how it all kind of blends together so harmoniously as well. It may pique your interest. And if what I'm talking about today, if you want to know more about these particular things, you can find 19 pages of it on my website, www.unlimitedemotionalfreedom.com. So you get the whole chapter. It won't, everything I'm talking about here, which is special, you get extra stuff, but there's other things on the chapter that are also really cool. One of the things I wanted to do with you, I've got a note to self to talk about my first therapist and talk about shame. Wasn't Benny awesome? Talking about all that stuff. When I was 4, things were already in the deep end. My mother was a drug addict. She was an occasional drug dealer. My dad had left 2 years ago, by the time I was 4. He was violent, so it was good that he had left. He and I get on really well now, but that's now. Then it wasn't so good. And when I was 4, my mother was in this habit of going to drug parties. And whether she was in the back room too, or if she was just stoned out of her mind, I have no idea. But I went to the back room. I was taken to the back room. I don't know for how long. I don't know over what time period. I'm guessing it's about under a year. And as a side note, we may never know exactly what happened to us, and that is totally okay. Yeah. And I was tortured there. And strangely enough, one of the things they did, and if you're triggered at all, there are people to help. Yeah. One of the things they did, it was the most challenging, but was physically benign. It was totally harmless. It left no mark. It didn't hurt me physically at all. They wanted me to react to the torture in particular ways. So if I would scream or try to get away, and I was 4 years old, hold my nose. I don't want to put myself in the perpetrator position. They would hold my nose so I couldn't breathe except through my mouth. And when my mouth was open to take a breath, they would put insects in them and then shut my mouth and hold it. So if I didn't chew them and swallow, they would crawl down my throat, and so I had to survive. So I learned to be still. I learned to dissociate. I learned to fly above my body. I learned to go into my inside room. And all kinds of other stuff. I created other people to help me out because I was alone in there. Oh, they were such good company too. And I even brought my dog in there. He was cool too. And first, dissociation and dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality, is what a fantastic coping mechanism. Really, and I was able to go to school and use my intelligence to function really, really well, and education was my way out. And my mother eventually came to, not eventually, it wasn't just the torture that was wrong with my life. It was all kinds of stuff. I grew up Jewish, which is not a bad thing, it just is. And there was all this emotional kind of fireworks going on all the time. In the middle of arguments, my mother would haul up her top and show me her belly. And apparently, the night before she went into labor with me, I was really smart. I must have had one of these, like, oh shit moments. I can't, what's out there? I don't know, I don't think I want to do it anymore. I think I changed my mind, can I go back? And I went from having my head down to putting one set of feet there and my head there. And I came into the world reluctantly, but first. And apparently moving into that position overnight caused a spiderweb work of lines over my mother's stomach. So she would haul up her top and say, "Look what you did to me!" As a way of shutting me up and having me go, and what Benny talked about is shame for being. I had a lot of that. Even without all the other torture stuff, there was lots going on. She also called me a book-read idiot. Because, I don't know about you, but, it was hard to cope with all that stuff. And I had the social skills of a gnat. And I had trouble making friends, had a hard time just being in the world, and really hardly any social skills at all. But I knew a lot. And I read lots of books, and I would disappear into the library. And so my mother called me a book-read idiot because I knew a lot but knew nothing at the same time. And it was her way of kind of keeping me down in that shame position so she could be more controlling. And, it was the best she could do. But we'll be getting on to more of that too. And it wasn't just the childhood stuff. Let me see how to say this to you. Okay. When I was 6, 4 years old or tortured. By the time I was 5, dissociative identity disorder. By the time I was 6, I was suicidal. And I mean, I wanted to die. I really, really, really wanted to die. I could not imagine how I could possibly live my life. I just couldn't. I just couldn't. And so I did my best to kill myself. I looked this up later. There is no medical reason why I am here. What I did that night should have put me into a permanent vegetative coma. And it did not. So in some ways it worked out fine. By the time I was 11, again I was at a crisis point. I knew I needed something. Lucky for me, I was growing up in New York City where like everybody has a therapist. So I wanted one too. And so what I did was I did the same thing as when I was 6, and managed to get a therapist. And this therapist, which is my note here, she was wonderful in many ways. She helped me survive my teenage years. And on the other hand, when I went back to her in my 20s saying, I'm remembering all this stuff, what's going on, she said, oh yeah, you talked about that the first few months you were in, but then you didn't talk about it, so I didn't raise it again. It's like one of those, you guys can do so much good work out there. And as an adult, I've got 3 failed marriages, 2 of which were abusive. And more recently, my child died. It was just before he was born. I was full term. And so in many ways, it's been a bit of a rough ride. But I can honestly tell you, with complete sincerity, that nothing bad has ever happened to me. Ever, ever in my life. Ever. Isn't that awesome? I love living a life where nothing bad ever happens to me and never can. And I believe that about my clients, and I believe that about everybody I meet and everybody I know. And one of the things I wanted to talk with you about is how I got there. And it's ultimately, there's all this healing work, working through all the shame, coming to forgiveness, and then doing more work again, and then getting to forgiveness. And that's what I wanted to talk with you about today, the stumbling blocks on that road and some of the different things that have happened to me. And we have a special treat from the audience as well in a few moments. And I've come to believe in my clinical work and in my personal work that it is not over until the fat lady sings. Forgiveness is the fat lady singing. Myth number 1, forgiveness makes it okay. Oh my God, did I struggle with this one. It is never okay. It's never okay. Even when you understand and you have understanding and compassion, it's never okay. Forgiveness does not contort the moral fabric of the universe. It's not okay. And it's being able to hold the paradox of recognizing, gosh, that was not right. And I can still let go. Here's one I love. How many of you have said, it's okay because it's made me who I am? Have you ever heard that from your clients? Yeah? I'm going to challenge that a little bit. I don't know about you, but being traumatized like that made me a blathering mess. What made me who I am today is my journey. I don't want to give the perpetrators credit for making me who I am today. I want to take the credit for that. So don't let your clients get away with it, or don't let yourself get away with it either. You know, really, if you really think about this, the logic of this. If you really think that what happened to you is good and okay because it's made you what you are today, then we should set up abuse centers for children to go every day for an hour or so of abuse, maybe like an after-school club, or maybe make it part of the national curriculum. It's your journey, not the experience. You are not, and I am not, the sum of my experiences. I am the sum of what I make of them. And here's the thing as well. How do you know if it's okay? You're not sure? You got some kind of fuzzy, blank, spongy spots? How do you feel? Or how do you not feel? If there's numbness, if there's rage, then something's there. You can look in your life now. If you're all over the place now and being triggered, there's this 90-10 rule idea. If you're upset right now, 90% of it is from somewhere else, and only 10% of it from the present. So if you're 90-10ing all over the place, there's something to work on. Myth number 2, once you forgive, that's the end of it. It's the end of it, if ever, can be a long way off. Yeah? A lot of people think about this as forgive and forget. No way. Absolutely not. No way. It's not about forgive and forget. It's about forget and integrate, forget and move on, forgive. Forgive and integrate, forgive and let go, forgive and have harmony. There are things that may be left even after you forgive, like behavior patterns. I was raped as an adult more times than I can count, as an adult. And I can't believe I actually survived the 80s without getting any infection in New York City in one of the heights of the AIDS crisis. It's amazing. And when I had already moved on to my one level of forgiving, there were still lots of behavior patterns and beliefs in place about myself that had to shift. And so even after forgiveness can occur, even profound forgiveness, there may be all stacks of things to let go of. And I've truly forgiven my mother. I have. But if she were alive today, I would not let her be alone with my child. I wouldn't. That's just smart. You know, it's not about forgive and forget and okay, I'll leave my kid with that stepdad who. Don't be silly. Of course not. It's not about forgive and forget. There may be some reconciliation in there to some degree, but it's not forgive and forget. And it's certainly not the end of it. People think, this happens so many times to myself and my clients, happened so long ago, shouldn't you be over it by now? Just get over it. Just let go. That were that easy. It was like, who was it? I think it was Sarah, wasn't it? Talking about go and have a hamburger. Get rid of your ME. And it's really not easy. Time does not heal all wounds. Time can make them fester and rot and get bigger. It's time plus process. Yeah? Forgiveness has to come from a really deep place. We'll talk about some other myths later about where else they might be coming from. You can't forgive just by forcing yourself to say, I forgive you. Do you ever see like kids together and they're in the playground and one hits another or something? It's like, Johnny, say sorry to Elizabeth. And Johnny says, sorry, Elizabeth. And the same for you. You can't say, I forgive you, stepfather, you cow, or something else. You know, you're not there yet. And it's okay to not be there yet. Yeah? And when stuff is still happening, it's even harder to forgive. And the stuff that's happening It could be all layers of it. Because the traumas that we have, the stuff that happened when I was 4 happened when I was 4. It ended by the time I was 5. And even though time is not linear and it kept on looping around, on and on and on in my unconscious, never stopping, and part of our job is to make that loop to stop, that other layers of it. My mother stopped calling me a book-read idiot, but she didn't stop being intimidated by my intelligence. And that would come up in many, many ways. She didn't stop trying to control me. She didn't stop trying to shame me. It kept happening. Things kept happening. So how to forgive when stuff keeps happening is tough. And when we have people in our lives that we're bound to in one way or another, that we care about or for whatever reason want to continue to have some kind of relationship with, whether it's being at a job and you're not going to let a bully boss, put you down or whatever, or a family member or whatever, it's still happening. It's really hard to forgive. This is one of my favorites. You got to give up the moral high ground. It's not easy because you really got to give up the moral high ground. I went through this very recently myself. I left my 3rd husband in May, and he had become abusive after the death of our son, which is very common. And when we left, he pretty much broke off all contact with our daughter. And I went through all kinds of stuff with it, and it has the difficulty of, it's still happening because he's still very inconsistent, shall we say, and uncertain about the contact. But, gosh, I so wanted to be right. That's so-and-so ex-husband, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I had to catch myself with my language, bad-mouthing him, and have to interrupt him, and interrupt me. Interrupt him in my thoughts talking to me, because I had internalized his shaming voice. And I realized that part of the reason I was having so much trouble getting off the moral high ground was exactly what Benny was talking about. That arrogance of thinking I'm better is covering a lot of stuff I need to work on. And so even though I had already done so much of the forgiveness work from when I was 4, I had to start all over again working with my ex-husband. All the steps are all the steps. I don't get to skip anything because I'd already done a certain bit of work. It always starts fresh. New wound, new work. There you go. Forgiveness means it doesn't matter anymore. Well, of course it matters. Of course it matters. And I'm just having all these memories of times when I was struggling myself and when I resisted forgiving my perpetrators and my mother and my dad and even my brother for not believing me because he wasn't the one in the back room. I keep on telling him we had different mothers. He doesn't quite get it yet. My dad is now a great dad. And when we were growing up, he was a lot like my 3rd ex-husband, let's call him John. And so my dad, his name is Eddie, and I have his permission to say his name in public. And my dad would not show up a lot. He'd say he'd come, and then he wouldn't show up, whether it was hours or days or weeks or months, whatever, very uncertain. And I had my own process with him, and he changed. And the person he is now that's not the father that abandoned me so many times when I was little. He's a different guy now. So I relate to him differently. Sometimes I still come across patches in myself where I need to go and heal some little girl for being left behind. And it's a separate work. It's separate work. And I'm finding it really easy being on stage here to lose track of where I am and get lost in my own memories with this and lost in the intense emotion of being here and telling you this. And what happened with him and all that abandonment still matters. And it matters because I don't want to erase any other little parts. I don't want to deny any other children inside of me that still need to be saved or rescued or helped. by saying, oh, it's okay, Dad, it doesn't matter anymore. I don't know what I still have left to do. I really have no idea, but I'm humble about that there might be something. And how it still may matter after you forgive is in terms of how you have your relationships with people. Talked about that a little bit earlier. My mother, when I was married to John, she was going to come to the wedding. Fair enough. And she said, and when I go there, I'm going to tell your father, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I was like, are you sure that's what you want to do, Mom? She said, yes, of course. You know, he left me with 2 children. He didn't da-da-da-da-da-da-da, all the complaints, the moral high ground. And I said, are you really, really sure that's what you want to do on my wedding day, is confront my dad and make a scene? He said, yes, absolutely. I haven't had a chance to talk with him in a decade, and I'm really going to give it to him. Okay, then you can't come to the wedding. What? Oh, my God. She did everything she could short of pulling up her shirt, but we were talking on the phone. She died 2 weeks later. We died with that between us, except it wasn't between us, it was her side. When I got off the phone with her, I went and I bought a copy of The Art of Happiness and sent it to her. I don't think she ever got a chance to read it. And if I had said you can't come to the wedding with even a shred of vindictiveness or punishment or control in my heart, I would have had stuff to work on. But because I really do love her, and I accept I love her, and it's okay for me to love her, within a corral, with boundaries, I had permission for that. It was okay that she died 2 weeks later with all of my maternal family thinking I killed my mother. So yeah, it still matters. It's okay to have it matter in the way you relate to people. Forgiveness lets people off the hook. No. What hook? And who's on it anyway? When you don't forgive someone, you're on the hook. Dude, you are so on it. You're swinging. And if your abuser forgot, which happens a lot, then you're swinging on your own. Yeah? There's no moral get out of jail card. Even if they forget, they are still responsible. There's no hook. They can't get away from the moral responsibility by forgetting it or being mentally ill even. And I know this is a controversial thing to say, but it's what I believe. And by the way, nothing I'm telling you is true. It's just how I see the world, my belief system, my way of presenting my story. Yeah? If it's useful, fantastic. Enjoy. Abusers can forget, they're still responsible, in my book. Yeah? They're not off being responsible. What I've come to, for instance, for my mother, as you've seen, is a space of boundaried compassion. That it's possible to, like, we're all beautiful, amazing souls. And no matter what we do. Neil Donald Walsh talks about God only sends us angels. My mother was an angel. Every one of those perpetrators who tortured me was an angel. Every one of those insects I had to kill was an angel. It was all angels. I'd rather not eat the insects. I'd rather I wasn't tortured. It's okay. I can have compassion for everyone, myself and all of them. And also tell my mother she can't come to the wedding with love. Yeah? They're not off the hook. Myth number 6. Why should I forgive them? They should be punished, preferably forever. I had a client who, she really was so angry. She wanted to forgive so badly. She was just so angry. So I had her imagine for it to put her into the space bend time where she'd go and she'd do whatever she wanted to the perpetrator as many times as she could. And we made the observation that, you know, in real life you can only castrate somebody once. So go into your imagination, do it as often as you like. Just get out of your system till you're bored of it. You know, she had to bring God in there. Because I'm thinking, punished preferably forever. Does that remind you of any dogma? I don't believe in that God. I don't believe in the God she didn't believe in. And she had to go kill him so that she could move on to forgiveness. It was a really incredibly moving moment. We got it on film. It was awesome. The truth is, punishment doesn't make you work. It doesn't work. It makes you unhappy. Punishing someone else makes you unhappy. Because you are interacting with someone out of rage, out of wanting to control. What you are putting out into the world is your shit when you want to punish. And shit flies around, and it sticks, and it comes back at you, and it may not be recognizable as the shit you put out there, but believe me, it's the shit. I spent years cursing my mother, wishing her tongue would swell up and turn black and fall out. I mean, anything. That her limbs would fall out. That her body parts would... Oh. Who was unhappy? Totally. I was miserable. I was miserable cursing my mother. Really miserable. And I couldn't let go because I said I had to let go. We'll get to that in a minute as well. You cannot be happy while you are raging. And rage is necessary on the road to forgiveness. It's paradoxical, and there you go. You can't get through trauma without feeling your rage first. But like Benny says, not to get stuck in it. Uncritically accepting your desire to punish because you're right on that moral high ground is a really fantastic way of putting your healing on stop. Certainly put mine on stop for many years. I forgive because I am an EFT practitioner, a spiritual person, a Buddhist, a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, etc. No, you forgive because you do the work of forgiving. When you force yourself to say, well, I'll be a good person if I forgive, so I forgive. That's the same thing as the kids in the playground. Johnny, say sorry to Elizabeth. It doesn't work. And your integrity as a human being does not come from your identities, your external places. And if you think that something outside of you is going to make you happy, I really feel for you. Because it can all be taken away. Everything outside of you can be taken away. One of my heroes is Viktor Frankl, who was in a Nazi camp during World War II. He had his job taken away. He was a therapist. His prestige, his home, his family, his possessions, his fillings in his teeth. And he had this moment where he's getting kicked by about 5 different Nazi guards. I mean, really kicked. And he had this epiphany moment. I don't have to be angry with them. Your integrity comes from you, not anything from the outside at all. It's not about being a Jew or a Buddhist, a good Jew or a good Buddhist or a good Muslim or a good Christian or a good Hindu or a good EFT practitioner or a good hypnotherapist. None of that. Those are all things we kind of paste over ourselves to make ourselves feel good about ourselves because we're lacking something from the inside. Forget it all. It all comes from the inside. Feeling good all comes from the inside. I'm in the habit now of waking up happy. And I don't get out of bed until I'm happy. I do some healing in the dream work if I need to, and I get up happy. And it's the way I choose to live my life. It's happier that way. You know, I could have, if I had been a serial murderer, just going out and murdering men and stuff, and with my history, it was like, yeah, okay, I can understand that. I've chosen something different. It's about choice. It's about the integrity of your choice. And your choice to forgive. We talked about yesterday, commitment and providence. That when you make that commitment to truly forgive, providence will bring you what you need. And one of the cool things about forgiveness, you know, we do this tapping, right? When we get our intensity down to 0. First of all, whose intensity? Because with dissociative issues, the person tapping is not necessarily the client. Yeah? And we did this on EFT 1 and 2, the last time I taught it, we did an experiment. We had this guy tap on something that happened when he was 19, and we got him to 0. He kicked back, he was like smiling, his face changed color, he was nodding. He was at 0. We went to lunch, we came back. It's like, okay, Now ask your 19-year-old how he's feeling. And he was still at a 7 or an 8. We had to tap on the 19-year-old. It didn't happen to him. It happened to the 19-year-old. That's the client. Yeah, so that's one point. Another with forgiveness is that when you've gone down to 0 on your intensities with the trauma, and you've worked through behavior patterns, and you're ready to say, okay, am I ready to forgive? And you say no, that means there's still more work to do. There's something hidden. Maybe it's shame. And it gets kicked up for all of us. I had my own shame kicked up yesterday. When Kate was talking about her beautiful daughter and how she survived chemo, I had this, oh. I had a moment of anger because her child survived and mine didn't. And what was underneath that was jealousy. What was underneath that was shame. What was underneath that was non-acceptance. Go back and accept again. It's not over. Forgiveness, just because you forgive doesn't mean it's over. There may always be more work to do. And nothing bad has ever happened to me. And the last thing I've come to with forgiveness, and maybe we'll have time for questions, is coming to the point of recognizing only after you've really done the work. And I mean really. With forgiveness, there's nothing to forgive. Yeah? That comes from my own personal spiritual beliefs, that we are more, so much more than this, more than my puny little human mind could possibly imagine. And I am unharmable. I cannot die, and I was never even born. This is all pretend play, awesome play, joyous play. There's nothing to forgive. Really remembering that every day, to be in a space of bliss and communion with the oneness and all you beautiful people here. So thank you so much. And before, that's what I wanted to say. So thank you so much for us coming together. And are there any questions? And Gwyneth, there's a fellow here.
Just the bit about the forgiveness, not letting the person off the hook. Can you just explain a bit more what you meant about the person is always responsible?
Sure. We are agents and we have responsibility for our actions. What is being held accountable is another story. The people who tortured me will never go to jail. I don't even know who they are. There's no way of tracing them. My mother's dead. She denied it ever happened anyway. Yeah? They cannot be held responsible in any kind of legal sense. They are still responsible. One of the things I'm thinking about is more of a metaphysical thing. You all know Harry Potter, right? And how the whole concept of Voldemort was that when he killed someone, he ripped off a piece of his soul. When we hurt others, we diminish our own souls. There's no escaping that. That's the way we're built. And we're built that way because we're actually hardwired for joy and loving kindness. When we act against our very nature, it rips us apart inside. There's no escaping that. Does that answer the question?
How does one live with that afterwards?
Yes, I do work with perpetrators. And tapping on the shame. Tapping on the shame. You could be a perpetrator and victim at the same time. Maybe within the same hour in a movie. Tapping on the shame. Separating out what we do with who we are, and then coming to a place where we can live a life of congruent integrity, of expressing our values every day. We're all healable. It's all tappable.
Shoshana, talking of things being tappable, could you just lead a few minutes of group tapping with the whole audience? Just looking at them, I think they need it.
Sure, with pleasure. I'm here today, and I am awesome. I have the awesome capacity to be touched, to be moved, to feel. This is what makes me alive. I so love being alive. What a gift. What a beautiful gift. This whole life thing's pretty complicated. I'm still working it out. I'm still figuring it out for myself. And I'm here to figure it out. I'm here to experience joy. And the depth of my sadness, my shame and my rage, is my own personal counterpoint that reminds me of how deeply I can feel joy and bliss and heal anything. Fucking anything! I love living life. And nothing bad has ever happened to me or anyone I've ever known. Namaste.